fighter is the legendary Bronxs, Charles Oliveira. This fourth-degree BJJ black belt has racked up 35 victories, with only 4 opponents lucky enough to hear the final bell. Armed with crisp boxing, vicious Muay Thai, and a ground game straight out of a snake pit, this Brazilian can end a fight from anywhere, at any moment. He's earned a reputation as the UFC's most decorated and versatile finisher. Every walk to the cage is an adventure into the unknown. Nobody knows how he'll do it, just that it's coming. With at least 5 more years left at the elite level and eyes set on reclaiming the lightweight throne, there's no better time to rewind the chaos and revisit how Charles Oliveira sent 31 opponents on a one-way trip to the Dead Sea. Rising from modest beginnings, Charles Oliveira was born on October 7, 1989, in the favela of Vicente de Carvalho, nestled in Sao Paulo, Brazil. At just 7 years old, he was diagnosed with a heart murmur and rheumatic fever. Doctors warned that sports could be too dangerous, but instead of wrapping him in caution, his parents chose faith over fear, and remarkably, his condition improved with time. At the age of 12, a neighbor named Paulo introduced Charles to a local Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu academy, where coach Roger Colho offered free training sessions to underprivileged youth. To support his journey, Charles' family hustled by selling homemade snacks and collecting recyclable cardboard for extra income. Fueled by grit and raw talent, Oliveira threw himself into training, and within just 2 months of stepping onto the mats, he claimed the Sao Paulo State Championship. But it all started on March 15, 2008, when Bronxs decided to make his professional MMA debut. His transition from BJJ was seamless, as Oliveira beat 3 fellow competitors on the same night to win the local PFC welterweight Grand Prix tournament. Over the next 2 years, the submission wizard bulldozed through 9 opponents, further solidifying his UFC candidacy. Dana White and his crew couldn't ignore such a talent, so they signed Oliveira to their ranks. He was welcomed to the big leagues by Darren Elkins, a BJJ black belt and NCAA Division II wrestler, renowned for his toughness and endurance. The American had no idea he was facing the future world's best strangler, so he relied on his instincts and took the fight to the mat. Charles gladly welcomed him to his realm. Elkins walked right into Oliveira's trap and got caught in a deep triangle. The Brazilian transitioned smoothly into an armbar and forced the tap, thrilling the crowd in just 41 seconds. Making a splash in your UFC debut is something only a few can pull off, but Charles Oliveira not only did that, he also earned the submission of the night bonus. He then faced Efrain Escudero, a dangerous submission artist with a 13-1 record. The Mexican challenger quickly realized there are levels to BJJ. Trying to escape, he gave up his back only to find a human backpack latched on tight. Bronxs went for the neck and tightened the choke until the opponent had no option but to tap. The Brazilian aimed to close out 2010 with another win, but was subdued by experienced Jim Miller, tasting defeat for the first time in his pro career. But the bad luck didn't stop there. Charles faced Nick Lentz next and locked in a clean strangle to end the fight. However, the celebration was cut short. It was later ruled that Bronxs had landed an illegal knee before the submission, and the win was overturned to a no contest. He lost his next bout against Donald Cerrone and was eager to leave 2011 behind, as it proved to be an unlucky year. On January 28, 2012, Oliveira was matched up with Taekwondo black belt Eric Wisely. The crafty Brazilian was ready to showcase his BJJ versatility. He started by dropping a bomb from top position and diving for a leg lock. His opponent struggled to escape the crocodile's grip, unaware that his fate was already sealed. Bronxs seamlessly transitioned into one of the rarest submissions in UFC history, a calf slicer, and got the job done early in the first. Next on his list was the Ultimate Fighter winner Jonathan Brookins. After securing a dominant position and softening his opponent with elbows, the submission wizard went for the neck. Like a python wrapping around its prey, his grappling left no room for escape. After back-to-back losses in Canada and the US, Charles Oliveira was granted a shot at redemption, this time in front of his home crowd in Brazil. On February 15, 2014, Bronxs was set to lock horns with Andy Ogle in Jaraguá do Sul, Brazil. The Englishman lingered in the line of fire and paid the price, becoming the highlight reel himself. The Brazilian wrapped up the submission like an unwanted Christmas gift, cashing in a $50K performance of the night bonus. But Charles wasn't done yet. Just 4 months later, he returned to action and turned Hatsuhioki's neck into a human anaconda squeeze. Do Bronxs closed out 2014 with a dominant unanimous decision win over one-punch KO artist Jeremy Stevens. The following year, he was set for a rematch against Nick Lentz. This time, Oliveira shifted gears, transforming into a striker. He worked the body and head with precision before dropping his opponent with a brutal knee to the midsection. After a tight second round, the submission maestro floored the gas pedal, leaving no room for doubt. He targeted the body, then wrapped his arms around Lentz's head, applying suffocating pressure. Charles locked in the choke like he had the key to his opponent's escape and walked away with both performance of the night and fight of the night bonuses. The next 2 years weren't as kind. Charles went 2-4 in his following 6 fights. The 2 unlucky souls who couldn't handle Do Bronxs were Miles Jury and Will Brooks. But a record of 2 wins and 4 losses wasn't going to cut it. It wasn't title shot material. At that point, Charles Oliveira seemed good, but not champion good. Then, everything started to change, and it all began in 2018. Charles Oliveira opened a new chapter, written in blood, and the first sacrificial lamb was Clay Guida, a vicious brawler with a PhD in violence. The American should have done his homework because ducking his head low against Oliveira is like signing your own death certificate. And just like that, it took 2 minutes for Charles to clamp on a tight guillotine. In his next bout against Christos Giagos, Do Bronx broke the UFC record for most submission wins, 11 in total. Then in December of that same year, he was scheduled for a rematch against the man who handed him his first professional loss, Jim Miller. But this time, Miller was facing a new, upgraded Charles Oliveira, version 2.0, and he realized it early in the first round, when the Brazilian subjected him to a gravity shock treatment. Then Charles took the bull by the horns, put the hooks in, and cut off the oxygen supply. That flawless display marked Oliveira's 3rd win and 3rd consecutive performance of the night bonus in a single calendar year, and he was just getting started. The next antagonist in his path was the 8-1 David Tamer. A short right hand wobbled the opponent, who began blocking punches like his life depended on it. In a desperate attempt to escape the onslaught, the Assyrian fighter laid his head on the chopping block, and Oliveira gladly played executioner. David Tamer hasn't fought since. Charles didn't just beat him, it looked like he took his soul. On May 18, 2019, the submission wizard was locked in the cage with Nick Lentz for the 3rd time. Once again, Do Bronx proved his striking could be just as deadly as a .44 Magnum. After dropping Lentz with an atomic right hand, he found his rhythm like a drummer on fire, and the referee had seen enough. With a victory that left no room for a sequel, the Brazilian closed the Nick Lentz chapter for good. In his next outing against Jared Gordon, Oliveira once again showed that he had evolved into a complete martial artist, just as lethal with his fists as with his submissions. He unleashed a perfectly timed intercepting right hand and hammered in a few finishing shots before the ref stepped in. The next lightweight to stand in his way was Kevin Lee, a former title challenger with big wins over Michael Chiesa and Edson Barboza. For the first 2 rounds, Lee promised to offer some resistance, but the script flipped in the 3rd when he shot for a takedown and got snared in a guillotine choke. And then came the showdown with the boogeyman of the 155-pound division, the one and only Tony Ferguson. At the time, Tony was still seen as one of the most dangerous men in the business. Though he had just lost to Justin Gaethje, he was riding a 12-fight winning streak before that. For Oliveira, it was just another fight. He created the blueprint on how to beat Ferguson, take him down, control him, and dismantle him piece by piece. The fight was a one-sided pounding, and Oliveira was the one swinging the hammer. With a dominant win over Tony Ferguson and an incredible 8-fight winning streak, Do Bronx had more than earned his shot at the gold, and he was ready to scrap for it. Oliveira's dominance and ability to end fights convincingly could no longer be ignored. So on May 15, 2021, he was set to fight for the vacant UFC lightweight championship. And the man standing in his way was Michael Chandler, an explosive powerhouse and former 3-time Bellator lightweight champion. The Brazilian muscled Chandler to the floor and quickly secured his back, looking for a rear naked choke. However, the American proved a tough mountain to climb and managed to escape the position. They returned to their feet, and now it was Chandler's turn to shine. Once he dropped Bronxs with a barrage of clean combinations, it looked like he'd score a TKO victory over the grappler. However, the protagonist used a smart tactic to evade punches and recover. Charles weathered the storm and came out ready for round 2. He wasted no time on the appetizers and went straight for the main course, blasting his opponent with a ballistic missile to the chin. He smelled blood and couldn't afford to let the American off the hook, so he chased him down and put him out of his misery. Not only did Oliveira become the new lightweight champion of the world, but he also broke the UFC record for most finishes with 17. The first challenger to dare face the newly crowned king was Dustin Poirier, a true OG of the fight game with notable wins over the likes of Max Holloway, Anthony Pettis, Eddie Alvarez, Dan Hooker, Conor McGregor, and more. Charles was ready to play Russian roulette in the center of the octagon, but he almost paid the ultimate price. Still, he showed the heart of a lion and recovered. But the highlight of the night came in the third, when Bronxs secured Poirier's back and went for the neck. The American did his best to defend, but he had the world's best strangler wrapped around him like a backpack. And just like that, he met his inevitable doom a minute into the round. The submission wizard was now hunting fighting legends, and his next target was Justin Gaethje, a brutal brawler who doesn't back down no matter what. As usual, Charles tasted a bit of Gaethje's power in the first round and was inviting him to a battle in the trenches. However, the American didn't take the bait and welcomed him to an open field. But when Bronxs returned fire with surgical precision, the American wasn't so lucky to recover. He was quickly subdued on the ground and forced to tap, saving himself from going to sleep early that night. For Oliveira, the victory was bittersweet, as he was stripped of the UFC lightweight championship for missing weight by half a pound. He attempted to reclaim his belt but fell short against Islam Makhachev, who showcased the full effectiveness of Russian Sambo. There was no time to grieve. The submission wizard was hungry for redemption and accepted a bout against Beneil Dariush, a high-level BJJ black belt with multiple world championships in grappling. In this bout, Oliveira took a page from Robert Whittaker's book and pulled off a same-side combo, a right punch followed by a right high kick, catching his adversary clean. Dariush was wobbled, so Charles went in for the kill. He followed him to the canvas and sealed the deal with a rain of ground-and-pound shots. This flawless performance set the stage for a UFC lightweight title eliminator, and on April 13, 2024, Bronxs was scheduled to face Arman Tsarukyan, a strong wrestler with notable wins over Joel Alvarez and Beneil Dariush. The Brazilian worked toward the finish diligently, nearly depriving the Armenian of oxygen in the first round. He then locked in a triangle, but the bell came to Arman's rescue. Bronxs didn't give up and tried another submission attempt as the fight neared its conclusion. But once again, the final horn turned out to be Tsarukyan's biggest ally that night. Although Charles came painfully close to winning, he couldn't sway the judges in his favor, and Tsarukyan was declared the winner by a close split decision. And on November 16, 2024, the submission wizard was set for a rematch against Chandler. The fight was an explosion of violence from the opening bell. However, it was Oliveira who gained the upper hand in the artillery exchanges. His takedowns worked wonders. The mat became his domain and he ruled it like a tyrant. When it was all over, the judges had no doubt who the absolute winner was. With a dominant victory over Chandler and Makhachev, vacating the lightweight belt, the stage is perfectly set for Charles Oliveira to reclaim what was once his. But standing in his way is an absolute animal, Ilia Topuria, a relentless force determined to crush Oliveira's dreams. Does Charles still have the fire to climb the mountaintop once more? Only time will tell, but if he gets past Topuria, there's little doubt he could reign over this division for years to come. If you enjoyed the video, front kick that like button, subscribe to the channel, and join the Dialed In MMA Club today.